Good evening, greetings, viewers and listeners from the void. My name is Eddie Akiba, and you are listening to the Impostor Syndrome Podcast bonus podcast, the best of the rest, the extra podcast I put out every month that features my thoughts on the rest of the games that I have been playing on Twitch and YouTube on my channel as part of the Backlog Gaming Broadcast Company, aka the BGBC. If you are just joining me for the first time, each month I play a different one of my favorite games of all time and then talk about it on my monthly podcast called the Impostor Syndrome Podcast, aka the Impostor Syndrome Podcast, the Best Games or Bestcast, aka the BGBC on the BGBC. I also host weekly live streams on Twitch and YouTube, during which I not only play the game of the month, but at least one retro game, one game from my never-ending backlog, and at least one RPG. On this episode, I'm going to share some of my thoughts on 2026's Romeo is a Deadman, 2003's Star Wars Jedi Knight, Jedi Academy, and the 1995 classic Chrono Trigger. So give me one moment, we're going to get started here. So the game of the backlog game of the month I've been playing this month is Romeo is a Deadman. It just came out in February of this year. The reason I chose that is I tried to pick like a thematically related backlog game to accompany the game of the month that I cover on the podcast, which this month was No More Heroes, the 2007 a cult classic developed by Grasshopper Manufacture and Suda51. Romeo is a Deadman is their latest outing that just came out, like I said, in February. So I figured, what better time to play that game than now, since I'm going to be talking about, since I already did a podcast on No More Heroes. Now, Romeo is a Deadman is an action-adventure hack-and-slash third-person shooter game developed by one Grasshopper Manufacture. It released for the PlayStation 5, Xbox X, and Series S, and Windows. Like I said, in February of this year. It was directed by a gentleman by the name of Ren Yamazaki and written by Suda51, also known as Gucci Soda. I believe that's how you pronounce his first name. Okay. So, what is Romeo is a Deadman? Romeo is a Deadman. It follows your protagonist, your character, Romeo Stargazer, a man saved from death by a time paradox which breaks the fabric of space-time. Romeo then becomes the FBI space-time special agent Deadman. Now, the game starts in the town of Deptford, PA, or Pennsylvania, and a small, which is kind of funny because I live relatively close to Pennsylvania. Like, if I drove 20 minutes, I'd be in, rural Pennsylvania. But, so Romeo, he's a sheriff's deputy. He's got a head full of conspiracy theories about aliens, and a haircut, honestly, that would rival a My Chemical Romance tribute band from the early 2000s. It's kind of, if you think about where the game takes place, Deptford, PA, or at least set, the haircut is kind of ridiculous, but I'll let it slide because it is Suda51 and we're not talking about realism here. Now, on that one night on patrol, he finds a mysterious woman injured in the middle of the road. The mysterious woman named Juliet begs out to be killed, but instead Romeo falls in love with her. Then Romeo is attacked and nearly killed by an evil interdimensional being called the White Devil. But Romeo's grandfather, Benjamin Stargazer, who's basically in this game a stand-in for Dr. Emmett Brown from Back to the Future, Doc, that guy. So he saves Romeo, but Romeo is horribly disfigured and becomes a cybernetically enhanced FBI space-time agent. Think like RoboCop meets Power Rangers meets Jean-Claude Van Damme's Time Cop. Uh, Juliet disappears into space time, and then now Romeo has to search space time to find his missing love while serving justice to the universe's most wanted time traveling criminals. A path that leads him to a final climactic battle with the space time king himself. Now, basically, the way the game works is it's kind of like I said, it's a third person hack and slash third person shooter like character action game. So basically, the way it works is you have multiple weapons that you can melee weapons you can use. You can switch on the fly. You have like an average all around kind of like fast but doesn't do a lot of damage like katana type weapon. You have like the big power type two-handed broadsword type weapon. There's like these fist gauntlet type things, and like then these smaller kind of like almost like daggers that are like more for like damage per second. And then you also have your weapons that you can also switch between. So you have like a pistol, you have a shotgun, you have a machine gun, and a rocket launcher. So you kind of think of like maybe like if you mixed like how like the weapon switching in like the later God of War games worked with like Devil May Cry, but not necessarily juggling enemies, but you're switching between melee combat and then more ranged weapon-based combat during the game. So that's kind of get that idea in your head. That's how the game plays. You have like you have like a special attack that you can use that when you after a certain amount of kills you gain like blood levels that then allow you to trigger like a special move that when you use it, it's very damaging, and then you can also like get health restored from that move. So if you think about like Bloodborne mechanics, where you're rewarded to attack enemies because it slightly regenerates your health, there's that kind of mechanic in there. There is no parry. Suda said he doesn't, not a fan of the parry, but it's very very fast paced, very frantic. You're going to be dodging and rolling a lot. So, kind of feels like a Dark Souls game mixed with like a Devil May Cry character action game. But anyway. And so, yeah, so the game itself, you're traveling to these different periods in time across space-time. They're spread out across multiple dimensions. They have like various themes. So like there's one level that's like in a 1980s like shopping mall, like American shopping mall. So think about your local shopping mall from the 80s or early 90s. No, this is in the 80s. Then there's that kind of level. There's a level that is kind of set in like an abandoned insane asylum or like hospital asylum, kind of very like Silent Hill vibes. There's like a level in the game that's like that. There's another one that's set in like like a city hall from a small mid 1960s era America. So different, just random time periods. There's most of the enemies. So there's a variety of different enemies. You encounter kind of like very zombie-like enemies called Roddards throughout the game. That are just kind of like the fodder enemies, and then there's more like grotesque alien like flesh creatures. So you have like big brute type characters. What did you do, bud? You have like big brute type characters. You have characters that can like have like an area effect, like lasting damage radius. There's other more like berserker type enemies, those kind of things. let's see what else we got here. Um, Throughout the game, it shifts between. So you have like the combat levels, okay, and then in between you go back to a your FBI spaceship called the Last Knight, and that's actually transitions from a 3D game into like a 2D, not necessarily like 8-bit. I wouldn't call it 8-bit. Almost looks like a Unity engine kind of like 2D style game, or like if you imagine like kind of how like Game Boy Advance games almost look like, kind of has that vibes to it a little bit. So where you kind of like, so if you think about, if you played the game Mass Effect, where you have the Normandy, where you go around and you have different areas in the ship that you can talk, people in the ship you can talk to. It's kind of like that, but it's 2D. Um, there's different mechanic systems in it. So, for example, there is when you're on this ship, there's these things that you have that are called bastards that are, they're kind of like special moves that you can do. They're on like a cooldown. And you get those by defeating enemies, and you get seeds. And then you can plant these seeds on your ship. And they grow into different types of these different types of bastards that have different like special effects and special powers. And then you can actually like merge them with different bastards and create new ones. There's like a Pokemon-esque kind of like element to it. There's an area where you can like make different kinds of like curry for like stat bonuses and like special items in the game. There's a relationship counselor on the ship, which like it's a weird mechanic. I've never even figured out how it played into the game. There is, of course, there's you can upgrade your weapons. You can upgrade your base stats by doing this kind of like almost like Pac-Man-esque style like arcade game on this ship. So there's like a lot of different elements that are going on. The levels themselves, it kind of, if you've played a Suda 51 game before, you kind of know what you're getting in here. It's a little bit dated game design. It is a lot of like combat arenas where you get into an area and you have to kill a certain number of enemies, and then you can proceed further. So it's a very tried and true mechanic. It kind of feels a little dated now in modern times, but I mean, again, if you played a Suda 51 game, you know what you're in for. The game, let's see here. So a lot of game mechanic too. The enemies, they have like weak spots. So like you'll have like maybe like they look like almost flowers, like, and you can shoot them, and that causes like greater damage or massive damage to different enemies. Of course, there's boss fights, which are very challenging. I found there is a mechanic when you die. There's like a roulette wheel, and you get like a on your revive, you might get a like bonus to like your health or attack, or in some cases you can actually revive directly from death and continue fighting the boss, depending where you land on this roulette wheel. It's kind of like, like in Wheel of Fortune where they spin the wheel and you get like a prize or whatever. So there's like that mechanic. Let me see here. And yeah, so as far as the story, it's kind of an incoherent mess, but like in a good way, if you know what I mean. If you ask, I finished it this weekend. If you ask me to like sum up the plot, I by halfway through I kind of like didn't know what was actually going on, but it's weird because like you'll be jumped from different time zones. There's a whole like, the best way I can describe it is if you've seen that that Marvel TV show that's based on Loki, where he goes to different like time periods and eliminates variants. I think kind of like that to some degree. Like I said, you're hunting, trying to find uh, Juliet through space time, and then like taking out like these named space time criminals. Um, let's see here. I will say the the one thing I'll say about the best thing about this game is style. It's overflowing with style. Um, it's almost like I wouldn't say like an interactive art piece or anything. I wouldn't say anything like pretentious like that, but it can be so different and so out there that it's worth if you're into that kind of thing. Like if you're into like some David Lynch nonsense style stuff, um, like you should check it out. Like because it's wild and wacky and crazy in good ways. Uh, in other ways, like I kind of wish the story was a little bit more easier to follow. Like there's stuff like, for example, like your grandfather, this character who's supposed to be almost similar to, like I said, the character from Back to the Future, but um, he ends up just living on the back of your character's jacket, and like talks to you from like your jacket. That's the kind of level of weird that I'm talking about here. The character design, Romeo himself, like awesome, just character design, awesome character design. He kind of looks like I don't know, like he's got this weird like helmet on that almost looks like a Power Ranger helmet, but like he's missing like an eye, and then he's got like this cool like bomber jacket on, and then like these like space pants, almost like spacesuit pants. It's pretty wild. It's pretty cool. Overall, I think that's what I enjoyed most about the game is its style, and also just the mechanics itself is fun. The combat, it's a little bit shallow after a while, like a little bit repetitive. But if you want a game where you just kind of get in there and just wreck shop and kill a bunch of dudes in cool, flashy ways with blood shooting everywhere, it's this is a good game for that. Some of the things I didn't like, whereas like a game like No More Heroes, which is one of my favorite games of all time, it's more that game comes together. It's like more than the sum of its parts. Romeo, I hate to say, like I wanted to like Romeo's a Deadman more than I actually did by the end. Like the first couple of chapters, I'm like, this might be my favorite game of the year. I'm really digging this. The style is great. The story's intriguing. But as it went on, I was kind of wishing for it to become a little bit more cohesive. Stuff like, and like again, I don't care necessarily about budget or a game doesn't have to look like $300 million to be fun. This game is fun. I will say the enemy design left a lot to be desired. You have like your standard zombies, which is fine. They're zombies, they're fodder enemies. But then like the other enemies, just something about them just kind of generic. Just kind of these like vague, fleshy, kind of brown. Just they all looked all brown and stuff, and just very not like super. And like even the bosses, especially considering like Suda51 is known for like having good bosses, his games. Like bosses themselves were challenging, but like just the design themselves, it's not like anything like really. I hate to say it, fantastic. Looking. The some of the levels go on too long. That feels like I said, it does feel a little bit dated in that whole combat arena like feeling. It does feel like you're playing a game from like the PS3, Wii, PS2 era in some regards. In some ways, that's great, and in some other ways, it's like you're like, man, you know. There is a cool like alternate world mechanic where you call this subspace, where you go and there's these TVs around that like can unlock different areas. Like you go into the TV and there's this weird, like the King of Time or whatever his name is. He'll like give you this like poetic passage, and then you'll be transported to the subspace that kind of looks like almost Tron-like in a sense of like it's all just like neon like squares and stuff like that, and like there it's very psychedelic, and there's like jazz like playing in the background as you're going around this subspace area looking for like keys to unlock different areas in the level. That was pretty cool. Yeah, like I said, I wish the story was a little bit more coherent. A lot of like the big plot points, you'll come across like notes in the game, and it'll just be like a lore dump of like a 5-page note, and dealing with like internet dimensional time travel, and it's just like okay, I kind of really hard to follow. But overall, I enjoyed it. I know this game got mixed reviews. Some people loved it, some people hated it, some people were kind of middle of the road on it. I'm kind of middle on the road of it. I don't like it as much as No More Heroes. I do love its style. I do love the art direction. I love the base, like core mechanics. I just like a lot of the stuff. Like I felt I barely interacted with. Like for the weapons, for example, I really after some point I just kind of really mained the heavy broadsword and occasionally switched to the katana, and didn't mess with the other weapons really at all. The whole like curry, like making, collecting recipes to make different curries to give you stat bonuses. I barely interacted with that at all as well. The bastard system, where it seemed like very like intricate and like ways you could create different bastards, whatever. The game doesn't feel long enough to, in some ways, support that system because I barely, yeah, there was stuff that by the end that those things really helped out in tough fights. But again, I didn't really mess around with. Didn't like. I wasn't like going back to the ship and trying 20 different types of bastards. I kind of stuck to like a handful, less than a dozen, of things that seemed to work and got me through the game, and that got me through the game. Some of the boss fights, like they're very challenging. I appreciate that. They weren't like cakewalks. Some of them are real frustrating. The last boss in particular, like at some point, like they like on the last boss, the mechanic where you can revive if you hit the right spot on the roulette wheel, you can get to a point where you can just do it every time. And like the other boss fights, you would die like multiple times before that option unlocked. Almost as saying like, okay, we know you're having trouble getting past this boss, so next time you die, there's going to be the revival thing on the roulette wheel. And basically, I just exploited that to beat like the last half of the game's bosses. Because at some point, like, you would have to like create your own weak spots on some of them, where like, or like there were weak spots, just like the mechanics of it was like very difficult to damage them. Again, not all the bosses, more some of the later bosses. And yeah, so it took me roughly about a little over 17 hours, I think, to finish it. There was another mechanic that you could go to like different like these randomly generated like stages and combat arenas where you can unlock like upgrades and stuff like that. I did like 2 of those, and I didn't mess around with the other ones. But if you think like the Chalice dungeons from Bloodborne, it's the same kind of concept. So overall, I did enjoy my time with Romeo as a Deadman. I do wish it was a little bit more. A lot of the concepts came together a little bit more, and I wish there was like a little bit more depth to the mechanics. But I did enjoy it. I did not regret playing it. The other game, the retro game of the month that I was playing this month, was Star Wars Jedi Knight Jedi Academy. The reason I chose to play that is because, again, with I try to pick a retro game that's thematically related to the game of the month. So in this case, the game of the month was No More Heroes. And of course, if you're familiar with that game, your character, the main character, Travis Touchdown, is a legally distinct lightsaber-wielding assassin. So there's lightsabers in that game, but they call them beam katanas. They're not lightsabers. We don't want Grasshopper Manufacturer to get sued. But since that game is heavily focused on hack and slash combat with lightsabers, I figured why not give Star Wars Jedi Knight Jedi Academy a play. It's a first-person shooter mixed with a third-person hack and slash lightsaber combat. It's part of the Jedi Knight game franchise series that doesn't exist anymore. Second here. I have a puppy that is asleep on my lap right now. He's very fidgety. Hold on. All right. It was released in September 2003 for the PC and the Xbox, developed by Raven Software, published and distributed by LucasArts. It was later re-released on the Switch and the PlayStation 4 in March of 2020. I was playing it on the PlayStation 4. The game is a sequel to 2002 Star Wars Jedi Knight 2 Jedi Outcast, and it's actually the 4th game, I believe, in the Star Wars Jedi Knight series. So kind of confusing naming conventions here. It's Jedi Academy, but it's a sequel to Star Wars Jedi Knight 2. Anyway, it's a single-player story follows Jaden Core, a new student at Luke Skywalker's Jedi Academy. You're taken under the wing by the previous game's protagonist, Kyle Katarn, who, if you are a video game Star Wars fan, you'll know who Kyle Katarn is. As Jaden, players are tasked with investigating a dark Jedi cult called the Disciples of Ragnus, while slowly learning the ways of the Force and committing themselves to either the light side or the dark side. It combines first-person shooter elements with hack and slash combat, like I said, allowing players to wield like blasters and lightsabers, as well as a variety of force powers. It's set a decade after Return of the Jedi and 2 years after Jedi Outcast. Like I said, players take on the role of Jaden Core, who is a talented Jedi Padawan. After building their own lightsaber, travels to the Jedi Academy on Yavin 4 to learn the ways of the Force. So I played this. I probably got, I want to say, 75% of it done. And it wasn't probably too much of the game left, but I ended up putting it down to go into the gaming backlog Valhalla with Ace Combat from last month. I don't know. I was not enjoying myself with the game. I know this game is a classic or cult classic with people. I get that. It's just more. This is more of a. I didn't play it back in its day. I don't have any nostalgia attached to it. And coming in, it's just I was not feeling it. The game itself uses a heavily modified Quake 3 engine. So you're familiar with Quake? That's a first-person PC shooter from the 2000s. Very much reminded me. In my mind, See, I've played all the modern like third-person lightsaber hack and slash. The oh, what do they call those? The Jedi Survivor franchise. Well, if you think about that, okay, that is very much a Dark Souls light style game. You know, they have that Dark Souls style combat as far as the melee combat, as far as like using a parry system, locking on, uh, dodging, stuff like that. And Jedi Academy is very much of an era where um, first person shooters. I mean, they still first person shooters still dominate to some degree, but um, it was of an era that it was so pervasive, those first person shooters, that it kind of like influenced so many other genres of games. I mean, for example, like the Jedi Knight series started out as first person shooters. I believe the Star Wars Dark Forces games are part of the Jedi Knight franchise. I could be mistaken. Please don't yell at me if they're not. Which were basically, they were uh, first person. They were basically Doom clones. So basically, when Doom, the famous first person shooter Doom, came out, every game suddenly became a Doom clone. Kind of like how today everything is wants to be like either like a Fortnite clone or a open world, style game. Back then, like it was Doom clones. Kind of like how back in Mario's day, platformers are huge. And this is a point in time where like so many first person shooters were being made. So what you had was in the previous game, you could unlock a lightsaber, but it was late game. So it was very much first person shooter throughout, and then you unlock a lightsaber. Well, people really loved the lightsaber, so Jedi Academy was like, okay, what if we kind of focus the game on the lightsaber? Which you can in this game. You have other weapons, like every mission you start, you choose like a loadout, like a primary weapon, secondary weapon, like grenade. But by far, the lightsaber is the most effective weapon in that game. I think my biggest problem with it is it's just it is trying to be a hack and slash lightsaber game within a first person shooter context in terms of like controls. And now I did play this game on a gamepad. I'm sure if you played this with a mouse and keyboard back in the day, the controls would be flawless. But on a modern PlayStation 5 controller, honestly, it kind of felt like this. The controls were so slippery and loose and frustrating. There was one level that was like a speeder bike level, kind of like a homage to the Return of the Jedi. What's that? I forget what's it. Endor speeder bike chase kind of thing, where you're being chased by the Empire, like on speeder bikes, and you have your own speeder bike, and you control them using the joysticks. And it felt like you basically could either go from like stopped to Mach 3 light speed by just barely touching the controls, and it was oh my god, it's so frustrating. Like I almost put the game down then at that point. And the story itself just did nothing for me at all, at all. The way the game works is it's set up, and you have like chunks of missions. So like you start here, like the game is like, here is 5 different missions that you can complete in any order that you want, and I think you only have to complete like 4 of the 5 in each chunk. They go on to the next area. So what that does is none of the story feels like it's it all just feels like random things that you're doing. There's no storytelling in games has come a long way. kind of, this is from like an era, again, 2003, OG Xbox, where a lot of times, in that era, like PS2 era, Xbox era, like the story in video games, it was just like window dressing. It was there just to give me an excuse to have you go in there, be a Jedi, fuck up some stormtroopers, hit some people with some lightsabers, and yeah, story. Yeah, we'll put in some flavor text in there, like construct some reason why you're on this random planet. But from a modern standpoint, if you're looking for like a compelling narrative, like your Jedi survivors, I don't think the Jedi Knight Jedi Academy exemplifies the storytelling capabilities of Star Wars video games. Now, don't get me wrong, I played a lot of Star Wars video games. I think it's fair to say that Jedi Academy is beloved by a certain segment of the gaming population, which is fine. I know, like, this game is very popular as a multiplayer game as well. Again, I'm not playing this game as multiplayer. So, anyway. But for me, Star Wars for me is about story. And that's even more so the fact that that KOTOR, Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic from BioWare, came out, I believe, the same year that this game came out. And that is one of my favorite games of all time because it has a fantastic story. Sure, you don't have action-packed jumping around and hitting people with lightsabers in that game. It's all Dungeons and Dragons dice rolls. But it feels so much more Star Wars than this. This is kind of an odd era time for Star Wars for me. This was post Attack of the. This is prequel era Star Wars. So post Attack of the Clones, but pre Revenge of the Sith. And for me, I had grown up absolutely huge fan of the original Star Wars trilogy. That is a foundational text in my nerddom, in my life. Those movies mean the world to me. I'm not one of these people who are like, the prequels have ruined my childhood or anything like that. But it was an odd. We went from Star Wars, like after the original trilogy, like we're so inundated with Star Wars these days, it's hard to remember a time when we weren't. But back in the 80s, early 90s, for a long time there, the only thing that you had was the movies, the original trilogy, that you probably either had on VHS or DVD that you watched religiously. But the only other thing that you had were like the expanded universe stuff, like the books, comic books, and video games, which I read so many of the expanded universe Star Wars novels. And I played a lot, I think it's fair to say that, a lot of Star Wars games are hit and miss. There's a lot of bad Star Wars games out there. I don't think Jedi Academy is a bad Star Wars game, perhaps. It just wasn't for me, I don't think. It got to a point where it was just, I was not having fun, and it was frustrating. There was some cool, like, different, I did appreciate that this came from an era where in first-person shooters, like, level design was very much we're going to make this level a puzzle, and you're going to figure it out. It's not going to be immediately obvious. It's not going to be just holding up on the joystick and running to the end of the level. We're not going to put waypoints on your map. So that was cool. It could be frustrating sometimes. There was another mission where you had to like collect different, like your spaceship crash or something, and you had to collect different parts for your spaceship to escape Tatooine, I believe. And there were like sandworms. And if you went out into the open sand, the worms would come up and kill you. Very much felt very Dune, which was cool. But again, overall, I did like also that at the beginning of the game you can like choose your character and like their what kind of alien they are. If they're human. Some of their clothes options. You can build your lightsaber. That stuff is cool. Again, though, like I'm looking at it from perspective of Even though I've been playing games for all my life, the Star Wars hack and slash genre has been iterated so much since then. So it's really hard to go back to Jedi Academy at this point. Again, I'm not saying it's a bad game, and I'm not knocking you if it's one of your favorite games. By all means, I think it's a good game. It's just, for me, it's just at this point in my gaming life and journey, I can just take it or leave it, and I just felt like I was going to leave it. The other game that I was playing this month was, let's see here. Oh, it was Chrono Trigger, of course. Now, I've been playing that since February. And I just finished it on stream here this weekend on Saturday for the first time. Of course, Chrono Trigger is the famous 1995 Japanese role-playing game developed and published by Square, which is now known as Square Enix, for the Super Nintendo Entertainment System. The game's plot follows a group of adventurers who travel through time to prevent a global catastrophe at the hands of an evil interdimensional being known as Lavos. Game's development team included 3 designers. They called them the Dream Team. Hironobu Sakaguchi, I probably pronounced that wrong, who created the Square's Final Fantasy series. Yuji Horii, the creator of Enix's Dragon Quest series, and Akira Toriyama, the character designer for Dragon Quest, and also of Dragon Ball. It's considered one of the greatest video games of all time, as well as one of the greatest RPGs of all time. This is, let's see here. Yeah, this is the first time I played Chrono Trigger. It's been in my backlog of Wall of Shame for many a decade. The reason I did not play it up until now is because I did not own a Super Nintendo back in the day. I was a Sega kid. Part of that was stupid fanboyism, and part of that was economics. My family couldn't afford multiple game consoles at the time. Or if they did, they weren't going to buy me a brand second console when I had a perfectly good Sega Genesis at home. For me, I'm a big RPG fan. RPGs are my favorite favorite genre of video games. My first RPG was the original Final Fantasy on the NES, the Nintendo Entertainment System back then, in the good old 8-bit days. From there, the Genesis, when I became a Sega kid, my 16-bit RPGs were the Phantasy Star games, as well as the Lunar games. So while the people who owned Super Nintendos were playing, the classics, Final Fantasy 2 and 3, as well as Chrono Trigger, some other stuff like Secret of Mana, that kind of things. All those bangers that Square put out on the SNES, I missed out on those. I'm trying to rectify that as part of this podcast. And I really, since I do have a show called the Saturday Morning RPG Show, I knew that I had to play Chrono Trigger. So I'm glad that I finally played it. I'm playing this version that released on Steam. I know some people have issues with that version. I didn't see anything terribly wrong with it, personally. I enjoyed Chrono Trigger very much. You can tell it was them firing on all cylinders. This is like the pinnacle of what you could do with the Super Nintendo as far as like graphics and RPGs. The combat system's great. It's unlike any other RPG I played, where it's more active time. Like it's that whole active time battle scenario where the enemies are performing attacks at the same time as you are. It's not each of you waiting your turn to do something. Positioning counts in this game. One of the things that I enjoyed about this game immensely is just the pacing. It is very story heavy, but the story moves along very briskly. Um, the combat is fun, um, somewhat challenging, but I never felt the need to grind at all, which is kind of unheard of for this era of RPGs. A lot of the game design back then for these games in the 16-bit era of RPGs was the game loop of you grind for a couple hours to get high enough level to go beat the next dungeon. And for many, many years, that's what that game design was, which makes it going back to those games these days far more difficult because of that grinding aspect. But I can tell you this, I never once felt the need to grind in Chrono Trigger at all. Um, the story was interesting. I really enjoyed the traveling to different time periods. So the way it works is you have like a main map area that you can travel through time to different eons and eras. So like there's a prehistoric era from like 65 million years ago. There's 1999. There's the Middle Ages. There's the end of time. There's the far future. So you're traveling like between these different time periods and doing various different dungeons and tasks and quests. The world map itself isn't huge, again, because it is spread out between all these different time periods. So, like, if it were all on one map, it would be big. But since you're traveling between different time periods, the world maps themselves aren't that very huge. There is one that's cool, like this post-apocalyptic kind of Mad Max, like domes everywhere. That was really cool. Yeah, so I had fun with the combat. The story was just, that good old, comfort food 16-bit RPG. Bunch of teenagers. We're going to save the world with the power of friendship, and we're going to conquer time. One of the things that was cool was each of the characters had like their own little like story type mission, like character development type missions. So if you think about kind of like how like the Mass Effect franchise has like loyalty missions, like basically each of your characters that you meet in the game have their own little story and plot that you play through. And then, of course, at the end, you all come together and beat the big bad to save the world. The game soundtrack, which was scored by, I believe his name is Yasunori Mitsuda, with the help of the famous Final Fantasy composer Nobuo Uematsu. I pronounced that wrong. I know who he is. It's fantastic. It's now granted I was playing the re-released version, so like they enhanced the sound, so it's not like MIDI tunes or like chip tunes on the version I played. But the music is fantastic. You could really tell, like I said, as far as like the storytelling and the pacing, you could tell that they were ready. When you think about the early PlayStation, about the run that Square had and the early with the PlayStation 1, as far as the Final Fantasy franchise, and in terms of Final Fantasy 7, 8, and 9, as well as even 10, you can see how Chrono Trigger laid the groundwork for that in terms of like story pacing, storytelling, and yeah, it was really cool to go back and play that game, considering that it is, like I said, considered to be one of the best RPGs of all time. Now, let's see here. Now, for me, like I know a lot of people like they really enjoy when people go back and play one of their favorite games of all time, and like they suddenly have to reevaluate their whole like view on games and like, oh my god, I finally played this game and it's changed my whole life and all this stuff. I will say that I really enjoyed Chrono Trigger, but it's one of those things where when you go back to play an older game, because at this point, what, 95, that is, we're talking 30 years now. It's not, it doesn't, one, I don't have the nostalgia attached to Chrono Trigger. So it's not like one of my golden cows or anything like that. So from an academic standpoint, I enjoyed it very much. It wasn't like, oh my god, this is the second coming. I can't believe I've never played this before. This is suddenly my number one RPG of all time. I wouldn't say that. Then again, it's not to me say that, oh, I hate Chrono Trigger, or Chrono Trigger sucks, or that Chrono Trigger's mid. Absolutely not. I think this is objectively one of the most important RPGs that was ever been released in the history of video games. It's just the impact at this point, for me, having no nostalgia attached to it, and looking back on it after 30 years of iteration in the RPG space, going back and playing it, it still holds up. It's still very playable. It's still very enjoyable. It's just it's not the, oh my god, this is the best thing I've ever played in my life type thing. Which, again, which is fine. Like, if you've never played the Phantasy Star games, I'm gonna sit here and tell you, I'm like one of the few people that like thinks Phantasy Star 3 is fucking amazing. Most people think it's the black sheep of the franchise. Most people back then thought it was the black sheep of the franchise. If you play that game today, you probably would be disappointed. But for me, because I grew up playing Phantasy Star 3, has a special place in my heart and my nostalgia, that I'm never going to hate that game, you know? So, to come at it from that perspective, in the sense of like, this is a game, Chrono Trigger, again, it's not a game that I played back when it came out. For me, because it came out in August of 95, I think, in the States, and the PlayStation 1 came out in September of that year. And I was all about the new hotness back then, man. I was ready to get in on the future of video games. I had me a part-time job washing dishes. Got me a Sega Saturn because I didn't have any bills or anything like that. I just had FU video game money. And I got me a Saturn and I got me a PlayStation. I had just finished, I believe, Lunar Eternal Blue on the Sega CD. And I was ready to say goodbye to 16-bit, baby. We're going to the future. We're going to PlayStation. Going to Saturn. Them polygons. So for me, I wasn't like, at the time, even if I could get a Super Nintendo, I don't think I was getting it to play Chrono Trigger. But, again, I am very glad that I played Chrono Trigger. I was crossed it off my backlog bucket list. If you've never played it and you're curious, give it a go. It's a fun time. It's what I enjoyed about it a lot too is that it's pretty short. I played it for about 2 months in the stream, but like again, I was only playing like 2-hour sessions, 2 days a week, and so I think it's only like 30 hours or something like that. So you could burn right through this. It's one of those games too. It has multiple endings, which is super awesome. I imagine that if I had a Super Nintendo back when I was a kid, and I had access to Chrono Trigger, I would have played this game into the dust. I would have played it probably like 5, 6, 7 times just to get all the endings. Like I used to back in the day, like Lunar, the original Lunar, that they just did a remaster of or re-release of on the Sega CD. I would play that game. It's an RPG, similar length to Chrono Trigger. I would play that game, beat it, start it from the beginning, beat it again. I did that probably like 3 or 4 times. because I just love that. I love RPGs. Um, as I'm older, I have less time. I'm trying to expand my gaming time to different genres, and more indie games and less the, I wouldn't say indie games, but smaller games, maybe less time commitment games. I want to try to broaden out my worldview on games as I'm getting older, not just focus on all the big games and RPGs, which is the point of this podcast that I've started. So that was the best of the rest. Again, this is more of a casual type. These are the thoughts, my jumbled mess of thoughts on the rest of the games I've been playing this month. That was the month of March. Now, next month, I am going to be playing. The game of the month is going to be Final Fantasy. That's right, the OG Final Fantasy on the NES. I'm going to be playing the recent remaster of Final Fantasy 1 as the game of the month that I'm going to be covering on the Impostor Syndrome podcast. And then the retro game of the month, I believe I'm going to play Crystallis from the NES, kind of Zelda-like game on the Nintendo Entertainment System. Again, Final Fantasy Crystals, Crystallis, figure that kind of goes together. I've never played Crystallis, so I'm looking forward to that. Let's see here. Backlog game, I'm going to be playing a game called Seasons, I believe it's called. It's an indie game that came out on PlayStation, and I believe it might be on PCs, I'm not sure. I have it on PlayStation, and yeah, it's kind of a cool, like, indie, artsy style game that I feel like thematically kind of fits with Final Fantasy 1. And then also, as far as the RPG next month, I think I'm going to delve back into Metaphor Refantasio and try to maybe scratch that off my RPG backlog. I'm probably about 60, 70% done in that game. I need to finish. So, anyway, that was this episode. Again, I just do this for fun. Most of this is a rambling mess. I'm not a professional podcaster. It's just me spewing my thoughts and opinions out into the world, and take them with a grain of salt because I'm just an imposter. I'm a nobody. I'm just doing this for fun. So if you are listening, if you are joining me, I do appreciate it. I hope you have a good rest of your month, and I will see you back in April as I'm playing a new game from my top favorite games of all time, and also the other games that I'll be playing. As always, adieu. I wish you good luck, and good day.